Minister, thank you so much for your time and welcome back to CNBC.
Thank you for having me.
Minister, what can you tell me about the current hostage and ceasefire agreement on the table right now?
Well, these are sensitive negotiations. They've been underway for some time now. It's always, I think, better not to get into details, but rather to highlight the importance of ending the current military conflict in Gaza, the scale of devastation, of human loss in terms of civilian casualties does necessitate an immediate ceasefire so that we can elevate the assistance and so that we can avoid further casualties and the displacement. Of course, for a negotiation to be successful, it needs political will on both sides. It needs moderation and it needs a recognition that it is in the best interest of all involved and the region that this conflict is terminated, that we have to look to a political horizon that can address the comprehensiveness of the Palestinian question, creating security for Israel, creating security for the Palestinians, and that can only happen through the implementation of a two-states solution, the creation of a Palestinian state.
What can you tell me about the deal that is on the table, though? It's reported that this is for the release of 20 hostages in exchange for a preliminary 3-week truce. Can you confirm that?
Well, I think it's been circulated in the media certain expectations of what an agreement will contain. These are issues related to the number of hostages, the positioning of Israeli troops, the duration of a ceasefire, the return of civilians to their original place of residence. I won't get into the specificities on the issues, but to say that we are hopeful that the political will be demonstrated by both sides, the flexibility, the recognition of the importance of a ceasefire, the importance of the freeing of the hostages, and that we move to a political horizon related to how we can deal with the security of the Palestinians, the Israelis, and the creation of a Palestinian state.
And a Hamas delegation will be traveling to Cairo on Monday for further talks, is that correct?
We are in constant deliberations with both sides. We have had the opportunity to interact directly and will continue to do so until we do find a termination of the military activity.
The proposal that has been put forward, do you believe that this is a position that Hamas and Sinwar will ultimately agree to?
I cannot speak on behalf of any of the two sides. We can continue to actively promote a proposal that might receive the agreement of the two sides, and this is done in conjunction with cooperation with the United States, with our Qatari brethren, and of course the formulations always take into account what we consider is in the best interest of both sides and the limitations that exist on both sides. For negotiations to be successful, it is up to the sides involved to show the political will and to show the moderation and the acceptance of dealing with the competing interests.
Minister, the reality of the situation is this. It's been 5 months without an agreement. All prior ceasefire and hostage release negotiations up until the initial agreement have failed at this point. People right across the region are hurting and regional stability is at risk. At the same time is also running out here, with Israel now threatening to go into Rafah. So what is at stake if this proposal fails?
I think the most important element is the number of civilian casualties. This is unprecedented that there should be 34,000 civilians that have lost their lives, 20,000 among them women and children, 17,000 children have been orphaned. These numbers and the way that the international community and the media have been addressing what is an unprecedented moral dilemma in terms of daily loss of civilian life and lack of definition of what is happening, I think is the most important element. And for the international community, for the two sides, to deal with this effectively does necessitate an end to the military conflict in Gaza, that we should move ahead to a final resolution of the Palestinian cause, the legitimate rights of the Palestinians, their right to the creation of a state where all parties can live in security and peace, in harmony, in integration, in cooperation. And for us to do so, we have to move forward and diffuse the issues that have instigated this cycle of violence, which is primarily an occupation of a people with a definitive identity, and that should have the same rights as all other peoples.
It's been suggested to me that Israel ultimately faces one choice now, and that is Riyadh or Rafah, normalization or incursion. Is that a fair assessment?
I believe that the issue is much more complex, that the underlying issue remains the issue of occupation, the issue of the international community's determination that the only resolution is a two-state resolution to the conflict, and that is the way we open the doors for all forms of integration in the region and cooperation. So we should not try to limit ourselves within parameters that do not deal with the overall situation.
Is Prime Minister Netanyahu a barrier to peace?
I would not categorize any position as a barrier. I can only go by what is being declared from an official perspective. And we have heard on many occasions Israeli politicians, members of government, who have indicated that they do not support the creation of a two-state solution. So the question should be, well, if not, then what is the alternative? What is the formula to end this conflict and to end the cycle of violence?
So I'll put the question back to you. What is the alternative? Because the Israeli position has been clear.
Well, that question should be directed to those who are objecting to the international community's consensus that a two-state solution is the only way forward. And it is not a path forward, it is not further negotiation, but it is the implementation. After 35 years of negotiations, it would be counterproductive to think that we can do the same thing and expect different results.
The Secretary of State is also here in Riyadh. What's your message to him?
A message that it is only the United States that has the overall ability to influence conditions and to motivate all sides concerned to find the point of convergence and to be able to break the cycle of violence. It is up to the United States and the international community, Western Europe, to be able to utilize and leverage their ability to provide incentives, but also to indicate consequences for the lack of achievement, the lack of progress in the cessation of hostilities and the dealing with in a comprehensive manner with the situation.
Many around the region and the world look at the US position and scratch their heads. On the one hand, the United States is providing billions of dollars in humanitarian aid to Gaza, but at the same time, and for several decades now, has been providing billions in military assistance, equipment and support to Israel. Do you see that as a green light for more deaths in Gaza?
I think there's a disproportionality in terms of the two sides and what they have been receiving. But certainly we can only hope that the ability of the United States to deal with the various regional parties, with the two sides, the Palestinians and the Israelis, will bring about a comprehensive settlement. Again, as I mentioned, the United States has the ability, has the leverage, has the global status to be able to influence and encourage the parties to come to a comprehensive solution on the basis of what was declared by President Biden, by Secretary Blinken, of the U.S. endorsement of a two-state solution.
So the U.S. has the leverage, as you've just said. Is it complicit then in Israel's actions in Gaza for ultimately allowing this to go ahead?
Again, it's up to the United States and all other participants to utilize their leverage and to be able to implement not only and to go beyond rhetoric in terms of implementing what is stated as policy.
When you and I last spoke, we were talking about the very significant humanitarian crisis that Gaza is now facing. Of course, those that remain in Gaza are under horrific conditions right now. What is needed to surge and sustain humanitarian aid and support into the enclave now?
Definitely a higher volume of assistance, which is available, but also the conditions in Gaza, the removal of the hindrances related to the vetting process, which would be undertaken by an impartial entity, the United Nations, as was indicated in the mandate of Security Council Resolution 2027. And the conditions are so appalling that there must be a more regular and higher volume of assistance that is provided, and the infrastructure inside of Gaza for distribution. And here comes the indispensable role of UNRWA and its ability to function and to operate freely and without hindrance within Gaza, and not being subject to constant discrediting or to targeting it and other NGOs that are working in the humanitarian field in Gaza.
What is Egypt's role when it comes to providing that assistance, and would Egypt be open to accepting Palestinian refugees if Israel does go ahead with this incursion into Rafah?
Well, Egypt has been at the forefront. The Rafah crossing was the only avenue to provide assistance, and we have been in constant coordination with our American partners, with Israel, to convince of a need to expand the level of assistance and provide greater volumes that can meet the needs of the 2.5 million Palestinians. So far, we have been partially successful in raising that volume, but certainly nowhere near the actual needs. We will continue to do so. The Rafah crossing has been open from day one in dealing with the humanitarian needs. The only days it was restricted was when it was targeted militarily, and we were able to reopen it in a matter of 24 hours. So we'll continue to provide our Palestinian brethren the assistance they need, provided that there aren't hindrances, that there aren't bureaucracies and regulations on the part of Israel that have had an impact in slowing down these assistance. As for the issue of refugees, Egypt is host to 9 million refugees currently. It undertakes its moral responsibility and has undertaken that responsibility towards Palestinians. But the liquidation of the Palestinian cause by displacement is unacceptable. It constitutes a gross violation of international humanitarian law that is also deemed as a war crime. And thereby we should avoid that issue, and to avoid that it has to be demonstrated that actions are not taken that induce displacement, rather than what Egypt will do in terms of dealing with that potential. We will deal with it in the humanitarian fashion that we have always. We have received already 5,000 to 7,000 injured Palestinians. There are multitudes of Palestinians who have come out because of emergency reasons, but we recognize that the Palestinians themselves want to maintain their presence on their own territory. They don't want to be in a position to leave their lands, out of the recognition that this might be an intentional policy of freeing the land from its inhabitants so as to end what is deemed as a potential security challenge.
With the exception of some tightly controlled IDF media tours, journalists are still not able to enter Gaza. How much of a problem is that? And in your position, is there anything you can do to address that, to ensure that there's transparency on the humanitarian situation in Gaza?
I think this is a problem for the media that has not been vocal in highlighting the restrictions placed on it. It has not undertaken its responsibility to address this in a manner that can resonate with the public and show the restrictions that are put in place that are intentional to shelter what is happening and to avoid the very painful imagery that exists and that is not as presented in various media quarters as is maybe seen in the Arab world.
Is there anything you can do about it?
There's hardly anything that we can do. We have no control inside of Gaza. Israel, as the occupying power, is the only authority that is able to relieve those restrictions.
Just finally, as we go back to the topic of the latest proposal on a ceasefire, can you give me a timeline and maybe what to expect next?
Again, it's not up to us to define that timeline. It's up to us to, again, highlight the importance of an immediate ceasefire, that the level of human suffering, loss of life, women, children, the elderly, is unacceptable. It is unacceptable in Gaza. It has not been tolerated anywhere else in the world, but it seems to have becoming more complacency in the international community with the media that is not, I think, sufficiently highlighting the human suffering that exists.